Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I'd like to talk to you about Poltergeist from 1982, directed by Tobe Hooper and starring Craig T. Nelson, JoBeth Williams, Dominique Dunne, Oliver Robbins, and Heather O'Rourke as the Freeling family. This film was written by Steven Spielberg, Michael Grace, and Mark Victor. Spielberg came up with the story, and then the three of them collaborated together on the screenplay. Spielberg also produced this film, so as a result, his fingerprints are all over this film. A lot of people tend to think that Spielberg hired Tobe Hooper as a ghost director because he was contractually obligated to only film E.T. that year, but I feel like that really discredits Tobe Hooper's work and involvement in the film, partially because I think a lot of people don't understand what a producer actually does. So, to clarify, the director is not the be-all, end-all of the production. The producer is the boss of the production, and the producer can hire people, including the director, and they can make more creative decisions because they are usually the ones balancing the books and watching the clock and making sure that the filming machine is running. This was Steven Spielberg's job. And as an accomplished filmmaker and director and the writer of the story, he was probably a little bit more involved than a producer would normally be. The way I tend to see it is an executive producer is kind of like a backseat producer. A producer could potentially be a backseat director. Spielberg himself was a very big fan of Tobe Hooper, specifically his work with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which reinvented the horror genre in 1974. So it was just a natural move for him to hire Tobe Hooper as the director for his horror film. He actually offered Tobe Hooper the opportunity to direct E.T., which Hooper turned down in favor of his comfort zone in horror. But I just find it kind of interesting that nobody ever accuses Spielberg of directing The Goonies, or Gremlins, or Back to the Future. Of course, on those films, Spielberg was an executive producer, which is a backseat producer. Another element that brings that Spielberg touch to Poltergeist is actually in the editing. Michael Kahn, who is Spielberg's go-to editor for most of his career, was actually assigned to edit Poltergeist. So again, what you're seeing on the screen has a lot of influence from Spielberg, but when it comes to the day-to-day, calling the shots, setting the shots, calling action, that was all Tobe Hooper, and I feel like his technical achievements are present on screen. I know for a fact his favorite shot is the one with the chairs on the table, and that is something that Tobe Hooper brought to this production, was setups like that, where it's done in camera and it's misdirection, and it's those kinds of things that the director would be responsible for in the day-to-day. Another controversy surrounding this film is a lot of people believe it to be cursed, but it's really more an exploitation of tragedy than it is an actual curse. The eldest daughter in this film, played by Dominique Dunne, was strangled by her boyfriend shortly after this film premiered in 1982, and this is her only feature film. And sadly, the girl who plays Carol Ann in the film, the youngest daughter, Heather O'Rourke, she passed away during the production of Poltergeist 3 at the age of 12. Some people tend to think that the curse stems from the use of real skeletons in the production. It was cheaper to acquire real human skeletons than to produce fake ones. But they use real human skeletons in biology class, and that isn't cursed, so I'm gonna just have to say it's a sad coincidence. This film is really an inspired throwback and kind of a modernized classic of your typical ghost story haunted house film. It draws a lot of inspiration from The Haunting as well as The Uninvited, but while those films were set in mansions, this film takes it right into suburbia and makes it very relatable to audiences of today. The premise for the film follows a suburban family who begin to experience strange phenomena in their home, which rapidly escalates, culminating with the abduction of their youngest daughter by a malignant spirit. And there's just a lot that works in this film. The cast is fantastic, especially the Freeling family. JoBeth Williams as the mother, Diane, she is terrified throughout the entire movie, but she just gives a very strong performance. And Craig T. Nelson as the father, Stephen, you really believe that he is a guy trying to figure out and navigate this situation. The standout performance in this film, though, really has to be Zelda Rubinstein, who plays Tangina. She's kind of a medium that communicates with the spirit world and helps them locate their young daughter, Carol Ann. By the point that she comes into the film, it's really, the volume is on 10, and she turns it up to 11. And it's just, all bets are off. It's really the crescendo of the film by the point when Tangina walks into the frame. The story also just unfolds very nicely. The pacing is very swift because it kind of introduces the uneasiness almost from the beginning, and then it builds on it throughout the entire first act, culminating with the abduction of young Carol Ann. It's also a very good mix of visual effects and special effects, because while the visual effects, yes, they are present in the film, the special effects were present during filming. And so there's a lot of instances where things are moving, or there's lighting effects, or there's weather effects, and all of those are the special effects that the actors worked with day to day while they were filming, and it just adds a very realistic element to it. And then the visual effects come in to kind of take it to another more extreme level, or more surreal level, or more haunting level. Had it been released a couple years later, it would have definitely been rated PG-13. I believe the initial rating was R, and it got bumped down to PG on appeal. There are a number of good scares in the film, and just the overall atmosphere is really good at making the audience tense and uncomfortable. I have to attribute a lot of that to Tobe Hooper and his direction. Yes, Spielberg was involved and he called a lot of creative shots, but it's Tobe Hooper's experience with the horror genre, and you can see it in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and his subsequent films. He just knows how to manipulate the audience in that respect. One of my favorite parts in this film is when they bring the parapsychologist to the house for the first time, and the one character, Ryan, is talking about how he filmed a toy car move like 7 feet across a floor over the course of several hours, but he captured it in time-lapse photography, and the father just kind of, like, oh, that's nice, and then he opens the door to the kid's room and reveals the living hell that they've been dealing with since Carol Ann was abducted. It's a reality check in an unreal sense. Whenever I watch this film, I really tend to tear up at the end of the movie during the third act, not because of any emotional response, but just because I find it very difficult to blink during the third act of this film. There is just so much going on. It has that crescendo with Tangina, and then the reprise comes in, and I wish more movies were like that. I was fortunate enough to see this film in the theater, and I just remember being completely blown away by the experience of this on the big screen. So if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend experiencing this film in the theater, widescreen. It is like nothing you have ever seen before. It certainly wasn't like anything I had ever seen before, and I grew up with this movie and watched it like religion on video, and it still blew my mind in the theatrical setting. And I will find myself just throwing it on at all hours of the day and all times of year. It's not exclusive to Halloween for me. It's one that, if I'm not feeling well, this movie kind of picks me up because at least I'm not that family. You know, it really kind of helps put things in perspective sometimes. And at the end of it all, it's just a really good story that's told really well. And that is where Steven Spielberg, I think, comes into it as the catalyst for this story. So that's it for Poltergeist. I highly recommend this particular film. If you have seen it, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about and would agree. If you have not seen it, check it out and please leave us a comment and let us know what you think. We will be discussing it at length on the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, so be sure to tune into that. And until next time, see ya!